Hi there, welcome. Thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate it. First thing I'm going to talk about is a little bit of factoring. You're going to see where this leads into. Hopefully you're recognizing what these are. If you take the square root of the first term, x, and you take the square root of the last term, you can multiply those two together, which gives me 1x. If you then multiply it by 2 and you get your middle term, which you do, 2x, you then have a perfect square trinomial, so you can take your middle sign of 2 and square it. Same idea here. Square root of the first term, x, square root of the last term, 2. If I multiply those two together, 2x, and then multiply by 2, you get that middle term of 4x. So you take your middle sign and you square it. Square root of the first, square root of the last. Multiply those two together, giving me 3x. 3x times 2 is 6x. Perfect. So you take your sign, square it. X, 7. 7x when I multiply, 7x times 2 gives me 14x, my middle, so I take my middle sign, positive, and I square it. X, 9, 9x times 2, 18x, great, middle sign, squared. X, 10, when I multiply them together, 10x, 10x times 2 is my middle of 20x, take the sign and go. What we have dealt with right there are perfect square trinomials. Perfect square trinomials. That is going to lead us into completing the square with a leading coefficient of 1. The leading coefficient of 1 there. So I'm going to look at something like this. Y equals x squared plus 8x minus 3. Okay, we're going to be able to change this and put it in its vertex form, its graphing form. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to slide this 3 off the back end. I just made room. And inside those parentheses there, we need to create a perfect square trinomial. So in there, what value gets added to make a perfect square trinomial? Interesting. So what do I need here to change this thing into a perfect square trinomial? Hopefully you can see it. If you don't see it, we have a tool. The tool to figure out this value is b over 2 squared. So I take my b value of 8, 8 over 2 squared equals 4 squared equals 16. So 16 would be the value that I added in there. Really what we're looking at is adding a value to one side of the equation, and when that is done, that's a positive y, you must add the same value to the other side. Okay, so it looks like this. If I'm going to put 16 here, I'm definitely going to have to put 16 over there. So my new equation with those filled in and there you go. You have a perfect square trinomial. Square root of the first, x, square root of the last, 4. When I multiply those two together and multiply them by 2, I get my middle term, which is 8, so I can take my sign and then square it. You have just factored this perfect square trinomial that you have created. Now bring everything else down. Now some people recognize, and I definitely suggest that you show your work on this b over 2 step, one step back from what you added. this 16. If I go one step back, I have a positive 4 squared, and I look at my factor, I have a positive 4 squared. The only thing I need in front of it is an x. So that will be your factoring right there if you show your work. That will save you a lot of energy and effort. Then we just kind of clean it up and get everything on the same side, so subtract 16. Y equals x plus 4 squared minus 19. We now have it in vertex form, opposite same. So negative 4, negative 19 is my vertex. And looking at this a value of positive 1, my parabola will open up. And you have just completed the square. We will do another example of that. We'll actually do a few more. Let's look at y equals x squared minus 10x plus 2. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to slide this 2 off the back end to make room for my perfect square trinomial. Y equals x squared minus 10x plus 2. What value do I add here to create a perfect square trinomial? So really, here's how I'm thinking about it. What am I going to drop in there? And it has to be the same thing there. The way I can figure it out, if you don't recognize it, b over 2 squared, negative 10 over 2 squared, negative 5 squared. So 25 will be added into both sides of this equation. 25 plus y equals x squared minus 10x plus 25. That is my perfect square trinomial I have created, and it is very easy to factor. If you remember what I talked about earlier, one step back from what we added, bam, x minus 5 squared will be the factoring of my perfect square trinomial. Bring everything else down, positive 2, 25, positive y. Subtract 25 from both sides of my equation. See what we're left with. There it is in your graphing form. My vertex, opposite, same, 5, negative 23. A value is positive 1, so my parabola opens up. Now I'm going to do 2 more examples and we should be finished for the day here. Let's get some fresh paper. There we go, nice and squared up. Let's look at y equals x squared minus 7x plus 2. Slide this 2 on over, make some room here for my perfect square trinomial. What value will I add into both sides? B over 2 squared, negative 7 over 2 squared equals 49 fourths. So I'm adding 49 fourths to both sides of my equation. And that is a perfect square trinomial. Doesn't look too easy to factor, but if you remember the trick, one step back from what we added, whoop, lands me right there. Imagine putting an x right in front of that. The factoring will be x minus 7 halves squared. Doesn't get much easier than that, especially for factoring that type of problem. There it is, everything cleaned up. We will now subtract 49 fourths from both sides of my equation. I need to have this represented as a fraction with a denominator of 4. So how many fourths are in 2? That would be 8 fourths. That cancels. Y equals x minus 7 halves squared minus 41/4. Vertex, opposite same, 7/2, comma, negative 41/4. A value is positive, positive 1. My parabola opens up. We will do one more today. We're at about 10 minutes now, not too bad. Y equals x squared minus 5x minus 3. Slide the 3 off the back end. Make room for that perfect square trinomial. What value do I add in here to create a perfect square trinomial? B over 2 squared will tell me. (25/4) to both sides of my equation. Okay, we can factor that. Doesn't look too easy to factor, but if you remember the trick, one step back, x minus 5/2 squared is my factoring. Bring everything else down. Clean it up. So subtract 25/4. Well, how many fourths are in 3? Top and bottom, so negative 12/4 is 3. Negative 12/4 minus 25/4 leaves me with a negative 37/4. Vertex, opposite, same, 5/2, comma, negative 37/4. Thank you very much. I hope that helps you out. Have a great day. Look forward to seeing you again.